welcome to Beaducation.com. My name is Colin Mahler and I will be showing you how to make the Byzantine chain today. We're just going to be jumping right into the weave, so if you have not worked with jump rings before, I highly recommend that you go watch our free video on Introduction to Chainmail before you start this. And once you've finished watching that, then you can come back over to this video and you will be all ready to make the Byzantine. So now I'm all ready to start constructing my chain, and I've already done all my prep work with my jump rings, and I have closed 4 of my jump rings and I've opened all the rest. I'm using a 5mm 16 gauge jump ring to make this Byzantine chain today. And I'm going to start with a single open jump ring, and I'm going to link my 4 closed rings onto this single open ring. And I'm going to close this ring. Like so. And then I'm going to take another open jump ring and I'm going to go through all 4 of those closed, let's try that again. Take that open ring and I'm going to go through all 4 of those closed jump rings again. And I'm going to close that ring. And now I'm going to let the 2 rings, 2 open rings that are now closed, I'm going to let them fall together, and then I'm going to separate out 2 of those 4 closed rings that I had attached, and the chain will fall down into a little section of 2 and 2 chain. And I'm going to take my paper clip. Paper clip is handy to have around, or a piece of wire, and I'm going to attach it to 1 pair of rings on the end of my little piece of chain here. And now I'm going to take this very last pair of rings on the end of my chain, the end farthest away from my paper clip at this point, and I'm going to separate them out, 1 to either side. I'm going to grab the rings exposed underneath them and let those 2 rings just fall straight down. Now I'm going to take this top, what is now the top pair of rings, and I'm going to spread them open. And as I spread these rings open, the 2 rings that I let drop in the previous step are going to pop up, and I'm going to help pop them up a little more with my piece of copper wire here. And I'm going to take an open jump ring, and I'm going to go through the 2 rings that popped up and in between the 2 rings that I spread apart. And then I'm going to go ahead and close this ring. Like so. And I'm going to add another ring right next to it in the same space. And I'm going to close this ring. Now as you're making the Byzantine, each section of Byzantine requires 3 pairs of rings in order for you to be able to make this little piece right here. And this pair of rings that I just added is going to be the first of the next 3 pairs of rings for my next little section of Byzantine. So from here, I'm going to take another open ring, link it through this end pair of rings, close it. So now that I've closed that one, again I'm going to add another ring right next to it. So my goal here, remember, is to end up with 3 pairs of rings before I can make my Byzantine section. So now I have 2 pairs, 2 of my 3 pairs of rings, 1 here and 1 here. So I need to add 2 more rings on the end of this chain. There's one more open jump ring. again through that last pair on the end of my chain, and I'm going to close this ring up. So here is our next 3 pairs of rings that we're going to be using to make our next section of Byzantine. Okay, so now we are going to repeat the process. We're a little closer here, so maybe you can see a little bit better. So I'm going to take this very top set of rings and I'm going to spread them one to either side. And I'm going to grab onto the rings that are exposed and let those 2 rings just fall straight down. I don't want to hold on to them. Now I'm going to turn this so that I can pinch under this, what is now the top pair of rings, so that they sit perpendicular in my fingers. And I'm going to spread them open. And when I spread them open, you don't have to force these rings open, just spread them open. Again, as you do so, the pair of rings that you let drop in the previous step will pop up in between them. And I'm going to take an open jump ring and I'm going to go through those 2 rings that popped up when I spread these 2 open. So I'm going in between those 2 rings and through the rings that popped up. And then I'm going to go ahead and close this ring. And I'm going to add 1 more ring. Take my open ring, go through that same space, and close it. Like so. And here's my first little finished section of Byzantine. So again, this is our first little section of Byzantine, and I'm going to go ahead and keep adding on to it. I'll add 1 more section just so you can get this firmly planted in your mind. And I'm going to show you a quick little trick. If you're comfortable with this and you want to speed things up a bit, you can close up some of your jump rings to make this process move along a little faster. So again, I've reached the end of my section, and this pair here on the end of my chain is going to be the first pair of the next 3 that I will need in order to do my next section of Byzantine. So I'm going to take an open jump ring, put it through the pair on the end here. Oops. And then I'm going to take 2 closed jump rings and link it onto that open ring before I close it. And then I'm going to take a second open jump ring and I'm going to go through all 4 of those rings again. And close that up, of course. And now I have my 3 pairs of jump rings on the end here, so I can make my next section of Byzantine. So once again, I will take this very top pair of rings, I will spread them 1 to either side and let them fall. Then I'm going to get a little hold on this top pair of rings so they're sitting perpendicularly in my fingers, and I'm going to spread them apart. And if you're going to forget a step, it's probably going to be this one right here. You generally you forget to spread those 2 rings apart and allow the 2 to pop up. And you should notice pretty much right away if you've linked a jump ring through the wrong place, because your chain will not look right. I'm going to take my open jump ring, link it through the rings that popped up between the spread rings. Close this ring up and add another open jump ring in the same space. Try to anyway. There we go. And close it up. Now here's a couple different design ideas that you can use. You can either continue on with your Byzantine and just make one long continuous chain, and this works well as either a bracelet or a necklace. Or you can go ahead and add some wire wrapped links in between your little sections of Byzantine just to mix things up. On these two bracelets here, I have used a 16 gauge 5mm jump ring. And on this one here, you might notice is a little bit smaller, and this is a 4mm 18 gauge jump ring that I've used. You could go a little bit smaller on the 18 gauge and use a 3.5mm jump ring. The same goes with the 16 gauge. You could go a little bit smaller and use a 4.5mm 16 gauge jump ring. And we do carry various sizes and gauges of jump rings on in our shop on Beaducation.com in packs of 50. Well, I hope you had a good time learning how to make the Byzantine chain. If you're interested in learning more chainmail patterns, please check out our class listing page on Beaducation.com.